Hello, everyone. Welcome to IP Watchdog Unleashed, where each week we journey into the world of intellectual property to discuss the laws, news, policy, and politics of innovation, technology, and creativity. With analysis and commentary from industry thought leaders and newsmakers from around the world, IP Watchdog Unleashed is hosted by world-renowned patent attorney and the founder of IPWatchdog.com, Gene Quinn, who has twice been named one of the most influential people in the intellectual property community and recognized numerous times as one of the top IP strategists in the world. Take it away, Gene.
Thanks, Renee, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of IP Watchdog Unleashed. This week, I'm speaking with Melissa Silverstein, and Melissa is a senior IP counsel, and not to reveal too much about what she's doing now, that'll be the focus of our conversation today, but she is a former senior assistant general counsel for intellectual property and brand protection. She has been a trademark attorney for a long time. She was a patent attorney to start with. So we're really pleased to have Melissa here with us today. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Gene. You've been so supportive since I first started my IP career back in 2009.
So I appreciate you being here. We're going to talk about, I've kind of left it hanging for the audience, what it is that you're doing currently now. We'll come back and loop that in, which I think is very interesting what you're doing now. But I really want to start some get to know you questions so our audience can get to know you like I do. And the question I'd like to begin with is, how did you get into intellectual property in the first place?
It's a great question. I was not planning on being a lawyer. I was headed to medical school. That was the plan while I was an undergrad. And then I had this wonderful organic chemistry professor who just so happened to mention patent law because he thought that it would be something that I would enjoy, that I would be good at. And I had never heard of it. And I went home that day, I looked it up, and I thought, this could be really cool. This sounds like a perfect combination of writing, persuasion, and also the technology that I enjoy so much. So I made a quick switch. I went to law school to be a patent lawyer. I kind of dismissed everything else that wasn't along the patent law line. So wasn't paying too much attention in things like family law and criminal procedure and those kinds of things. But I did the patent bar my second year of law school so I could get going with an internship as a patent agent. And I really enjoyed it. I always think of patent law as being like a big jigsaw puzzle. I love jigsaw puzzles. I'm a huge fan of them. So writing claims to me was almost like figuring out a really difficult jigsaw puzzle, how to best put this together for the client and protect what they've invented.
So you did purposely go down this path. This didn't just find you, really.
I purposely went down this path. I applied to law school knowing I was going to be a patent lawyer. I didn't give myself any chance of failure. Failure was never an option. I did my patent bar exam review course while I was in school in my 2L year, and I knew I was going to pass it. I just gave myself no room for error. I passed it on my first go-round and got going right away with an internship.
That's the way to do it. So did you take my course? Did you take the course that John White and I teach?
I took John White, yeah. It was mailed to me on DVDs.
Yeah, so I was not teaching on the DVDs. I've been teaching as a part of that course live since 1999, 2000, in that time frame. But then over the years, once we transitioned from mailing DVDs and we started just mailing CDs, I guess it was, with just the audio. When we transitioned online, that's when I started teaching online as well. And it's been a fun journey.
It was a great course. And seeing John White at the conference, I told him he's a celebrity in my head because I spent so much time listening to his voice and seeing him teach me all things about 101 and 112 and all the things.
Yeah, he's had some people come up to him and refer to him as the voice of God that they can't get out of their head.
Yes, I still hear it.
And he's even had some significant others come up to him and introduce themselves and say, "You don't know who I am, but I've heard your voice for far too long."
I felt so confident after taking that course. I probably did about 5,000 practice questions. No joke. And he just made me feel really confident in the way he taught it.
Yeah, he's great. He's a good guy, good friend. He was my best man at my wedding, and he lives only a couple miles away. So John and I have been sort of like frick and frack together for a very long time. So now, okay, so you got into the industry to be a patent lawyer.
Yes.
And then at some point along the way, we lost you to the trademark side. Like the power of the dark side, I guess, is great, huh? I mean, did it pull you away or how did that happen?
So I never really left the patent world. I just added trademarks on top of it. So I have held a lot of different positions in the IP space. I first started out as a patent preparation prosecution person. Then I went to academic tech transfer, which was a very interesting world. And then I went in house. I was kind of handed everything. So it was just me. And being in house, the teams usually run very lean. And so I was in charge of patents, trademarks, brand protection, and IP litigation worldwide for 15 very well-known consumer brands. So I never left patents. I never abandoned my origins. I just added on a lot on top of that. So I was able to cycle through those things very quickly. And I think being in the trademark space so heavily with consumer brands made me better with patents, made me more attentive to detail, made me more mindful of how the consumer is going to experience this product. So I really do think there's a lot of complementary things between the two.
Well, there certainly is a certain way that you look at intellectual property when you're looking at it through the lens of a trademark. It's more business than it is
Yes,
anything else. And do think that if you look at patents through that same lens, you just look at it differently. Because this
yes,
is not just an asset or not just something that you get to hang on the wall or something you get to check a box because it's the right thing to do. If you're not wasting your money, you're getting it for a business purpose. And I think
exactly.
too often people miss that point.
Yes, and that was a very big shift coming from private practice and academia over to consumer goods in-house, where it actually the patent has to protect the product that I can go buy at Target. It has to be able to go into brand registry with Amazon and protect us against infringers. So there needs to be this business purpose at all times front of mind when we're developing these patents, not only for protection, but for enforcement purposes.
I have always long said that I think far too few people get design patents. Now, I understand why design patents have a bad name in a lot of areas of the community because for so long the invention scams were trying to make people think they were getting utility patents, but they were really getting design patents. And when you think you're getting a utility patent, you wind up with a design patent. I mean, the quantum, the quality, the what coverage, it's just totally different. And it's borderline fraudulent, if not entirely fraudulent. So design patents, I think, have gotten a really bad rap because they're exactly the right tool in your toolbox. And when you don't have them, you really need them, you're in trouble. And what breaks this up is this whole idea of what's going on in Amazon. I mean, I think a lot of people could do real well with some thoughtful design patent strategy and then even some very narrow claims because you want to cover the knockoff.
Exactly. You got it with that one. And I love design patents. I when I got into the consumer goods space, 75% of the work I did in the patent space were design patents. And they're very powerful. They're very underutilized in my opinion. We had a very successful ITC case using we enforced design patents for Hydro Flask. And we got the top injunctive relief, a general exclusion order based on trademarks and design patents, which is pretty phenomenal. So, because of the extremely fast proliferation of online marketplaces, design patents become even more critical. In my experience, I found that things like brand registry work very well by submitting design patents because it's easier to compare a side by side of does this product infringe my design patent. So it's a it's a simplified process compared to Apex or a full-blown utility patent lawsuit. So especially if clients have any kind of consumer goods, if they're going to be sold on Alibaba or any of these marketplaces all across the world, design patents are almost mission critical, I would say, because guaranteed, once a product gets popular, we are going to see knockoffs, we are going to see counterfeits, and without that tool in our enforcement toolbox, there's not a whole lot we can do.
I think they're critical for small companies, startups, independent inventors as well, because so often you see in that space, they're going to try and raise money. The Kickstarter or whatever the platform of the moment is, where they're going to try and go out and get some crowdfunding. And there are players out there in the marketplace that have had standing orders to the people who work for them that if somebody raises $100,000 in one of these funding efforts, they immediately try and beat them to market. It's the seedy part of the business, but a design patent can at least prevent those people from knocking you off. I think they're very important.
I think they're extremely important, especially what you said with business growth, acquisition, where a patent portfolio could theoretically cover markets where the products are being sold. But where is the strategy around where the products are going to be counterfeited? And so when I was in the space, a whole conversation I would have with marketing and sales and product teams were, okay, great, you're selling this in, of course, major markets in Europe, some of the South American markets, but what is our plan on protection in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Singapore, where we have these issues on some of these platforms, these infringement issues, and we need to start thinking clearly from day one of what is our international filing strategy for enforcement purposes. A lot of that gets left behind. We don't necessarily think that way all the time. So I think the business teams really appreciated when I brought that up. They weren't thinking that way. And it also has to, it has to fit in their budget. So we had to make some calculated decisions sometimes of maybe letting some markets go and protecting in major counterfeiting markets.
So that's really interesting to me is because I think more and more people are starting to come to the idea that they have to question their historic filing decisions, whether it be with respect to patents or trademarks, and where do you own the rights, and you can't give up markets that are going to be interesting to you 5 or 10 years down the road. But if it's not interesting to you now, maybe you should be asking certain questions. And it's all driven by budgets. It's all driven by we don't have enough money to do what we really need. And I think, unfortunately, too often there's a paralyzing fear of giving up on a market or giving up on a patent family or giving up on whatever it is, because nobody ever seems to lose their job by just paying more to maintain everything everywhere around the world. You lose your job if you give the wrong write up in the wrong location. But then that just eats up budgets. And for the first time, really, I think, and this was at IP Watchdog Live a few weeks ago, I sense that the in-house community is starting to ask these questions in a very strategic way. Are you feeling that things are shifting a little there?
I do. That's a great point. I brought in a lot of those shifts. Sometimes it was kicking and screaming with the business team. So, first, I think you mentioned about the cost of doing business around patents. It's a whole culture shift around it, meeting with the product teams very early on in the stage gate process and saying, where is your line item for IP protection? And it just wasn't on their radar at that time. I feel like I brought very positive change to the business teams when they understood from day one, okay, they have all of these different costs. They've got to have a line for IP. Put it in as a cost of doing business from day one. So everybody understands this is an investment. We have to have this investment laid out from the start. The other point I wanted to hit on were the maintenance fees. And I know when I came into a lot of my positions, the idea was just pay, 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 don't even consider it. Let's just keep it open for the what if. What if we develop this product in the future? What if we want to do something with it? What if we want to sell it? What value can we generate from this? And again, I'd have these very hard discussions with business teams saying, how likely is it for us to do something with this patent on its 12th maintenance fee if we've done nothing at this point? Are we even investing in R&D around this anymore? Has the technology evolved to a point where this is essentially obsolete? And so I think the phrase we hear a lot in patent world is not everyone's baby is beautiful, which I don't necessarily like that phrase, but it was almost like I appreciate what they've done. What they've come up with is a beautiful solution to a problem. However, let's look at it in business terms. How is this going to benefit the business? So every quarter, I would put meetings on the product team's calendar and the marketing team's calendar. We would do quarterly patent maintenance fee reviews. And we would show how much money they saved. And they didn't realize, those small maintenance fees in some countries, 100, 200, 400, 500. If we just keep saying yes to them, they add up. It's real money that adds up over time. And I don't think they had visibility to that. But once we started showing a real savings that we could put into new ideas, they really liked it. And so it's just changing the mindset, changing culture. And I did notice that when I heard a lot of the in-house people speaking at IP Watchdog, that I think that culture shift is real because budgets are, I think, even tighter than ever.
I think you're right. And for those people who aren't having these conversations yet, they're going to need to start having them in a much more strategic way. The one thing that came up to my mind when you were just saying this is, and I never thought about it quite this way, but I wonder whether there's a certain psychology choosing to have maintenance fees start low and go up, year after year, or in the US every 3.5 years, they go up and they go up higher. I think it probably just has to do with this idea that, well, if it's that valuable, you'll be willing to pay for it. And if it's not valuable, you'll let it go into the public domain. But there's a subplot here. What it is if the business people are just used to say, oh, yeah, no, let's just keep it. It's only a couple $100. Let's just pay it. 10 years, 11 years go by. And now it starts to be, well, now that's a real money. But they for so long have been paying these annuities and just used to saying yes, that it's easy to fall into that. Well, yeah, that's just something we always say yes to. So we're going to say yes this year. I wonder what psychological component to that is, but I bet you it's very real for people.
I think so. As you know, inventors are very passionate people, very creative people. They've put their heart and soul into these inventions, even in corporate space, working with a lot of these brands very closely, very well-known brands. The engineers are very passionate about what they've done, as they should be, I think. So they don't want to necessarily see that let go and say, maybe it wasn't something that the business could develop at that time. It's not necessarily saying the invention was bad. It just didn't fit into the product roadmap at that time. And I see the pain in their eyes. I've seen that before. It's a very painful conversation to have. But then once people realize why we're doing this is not to say this invention isn't good or isn't worthwhile. It's to say we want to spend your hard-earned money in a better, more efficient way. And you're right. I think there is some psychology associated with that. It was always a touchy subject, but I think when people realized I was trying to do this for the good of their budget, they were more receptive.
I also think there's something interesting about the way that trademarks are normally enforced, because you can't allow damage to occur.
Right.
Because, once the damage has occurred, it takes so long to reclaim that and rebuild trust with the consumer. And you just can't tolerate damage or dilution on any level. You have to address it quickly. Whereas on the patent side, a lot of times people will let it go and let it go, let it go, and hope that damages will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't think that's certainly not a strategy anymore in the U.S. With the federal circuit, the way that they look at things. And I think patent owners would be much better off if they looked at things more like trademark owners do. And then that leads me to, there's always been this kind of dichotomy, which is interesting to people who are at certain places in our industry who maybe do with software or standard essential patents or life sciences. And if you're on the patent owner side, it's easy to look at these things and say, oh, the system is broken. It's certainly, whether you think it's broken or not, I think we could probably all agree it's different than it was 10 years ago, even more different than it was 20 years ago. But on the consumer product side, the system works pretty well. And I think it's because you're trying to get very specific rights that cover very specific things, and you're willing to get design patents and very narrow claims, because the knockoff, not a operating competitor, is usually the concern.
Right. I agree. I mean, I think it, of course, could be improved, but for us, I think it worked well. I think it does matter what gets claimed. I think you hit it. I think what is actually claimed is extremely important. Products evolve, so therefore it falls out of claim scope, and it's hard to tell a sales or a business team why we can't enforce on this patent because product evolved. It doesn't. The claims don't read on it anymore, which is also a hard conversation to have with business-minded people.
Yeah. So before we lose too much more time to this, I want to pivot because now we've gotten to know you a little bit in what you've done and been involved in patents, you've been involved in trademarks and branding, and you've really done it all. Then all of a sudden you decided to have a career shift. And this is fairly recent, right? Because I remember inviting you to speak at IP Watchdog Live, and you said yes. And you were actually maybe one of the very first speakers that signed on for the event we just did. So then I try and find out who's available, and then I'm creating my list of players, so to speak, and then I got to figure out where do I plug these players in. And then when I started designing the program, I went back and I was looking at your bio and what it is that you're doing now. And I'm like, what I thought I was going to have you do doesn't seem to fit anymore. But we came up with, I think, an even better solution. But why don't you tell the audience what it is that you're doing?
Sure. So last July, after almost 20 years of IP work, I decided to gift myself a break, a real break, several months off, which I'd never done before. And it came to me that I wanted to do something more to help fellow lawyers, high achievers who were struggling. I've also been sober for 13 years. I've been very open about this on social media. And I decided to create a recovery coaching practice for professionals. So people like lawyers, doctors, engineers, patent agents who are struggling with substance use. I have firsthand knowledge of what that's like and how demoralizing it can feel when we're so good, so accomplished in one part of our life, but can't seem to get this other part of our life together. So I've been building this up. It officially launched January 1st, 2026. It's been going amazing. I coach both individuals and organizations around that culture shift that we were talking about, around a different way of approaching the legal field where alcohol is no longer tied in so closely to the culture. I've been very happy doing this work. I love getting to help people. I was first kind of an unofficial coach for the past 4 years. I was on a work call back in 2022 for International Women's Day on a panel, and I was asked a relevant question. Was so scared of saying I was sober at work because I thought it was a mark of shame that I had failed in some part of my life. But something about that question said, disclose it, just say it. It was in front of 1,500 people at this company. And I said it. It was scary, but I did it. After that call, the response was incredible as far as people coming up to me saying, I had no idea. Thank you for saying that out loud. I've been struggling. What can I do? My child is struggling. Thank you for even saying this because I grew up in an alcoholic household. Nobody ever talks about this in the corporate space. And so I feel like I've been an unofficial recovery coach since that moment because the word got out, and I've been very open on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok, because I want people like us to be able to have this kind of conversation in the open. It's nothing to be ashamed about. I know lawyers struggle at a huge percentage compared to the population with alcohol use. So why aren't we having more of these conversations out in the light?
One interesting thing about what you just said, and I almost had to start to laugh when you said it, is that how did you put it? You said that you thought that letting people know that you were sober would make them think you're a failure. That just makes no sense to me at all. I mean, I guess on some level it does because people so often focus on the negative and the problem, and it is not easy to get and stay sober. And we can talk about my issues a little bit here as well, but the biggest issue I have is not maybe so much with the drinking as much as it was with weight. And I can tell you for sure, getting your weight in order, there's nothing easy about whatever foible you have. Overcoming that is just not easy. That's number one. So congratulations to you. And I do think you're making a difference. This is the conversation that you and I, along with Will Covey and the new director of the Office of Enrollment and Discipline, Kim Keller, had at IP Watchdog Live, which is how do you, as a law firm, as an organization, as a profession, help those people who are in need of help. We were focusing on substance abuse, and not just alcohol, but substance abuse broadly. but then do it through the lens of realizing that what we need to do as lawyers is always keep the client whole and make sure that you're helping the person without hurting the client and making sure the client winds up being okay in this entire process. So that was the conversation that we had. I think a lot of people really got a lot out of that. And I had a lot of really good feedback. But this is something that really touches us all in one way, shape, or form. I don't know anybody that hasn't had an encounter with somebody that's had a drinking problem or a substance abuse problem, and family member or business colleague, and you want to help.
Exactly. We wanna help, and I think it's breaking the facade of perfection. Because I know me as a lawyer, I wanted to project a certain image of professionalism, of strength, of infallibility almost non-human qualities. But, when you shared vulnerably during our panel, I could see in the audience members' eyes just how appreciative they were of that, of someone being willing to share publicly about their struggles and how they overcame them. And I do think we need more of this, especially in the legal profession.
So I could say what I said during the panel so that everybody's on the same page and understands what we're talking about here now is so most people realize that Gene is big, Gene is fat, right? And the presumption there is that well you just eat too much. And I'm not going to say I didn't eat too much, but where I got really most of my weight problem was through drinking. And and it becomes sort of like a snowball rolling downhill. Like you drink, you're relaxing. Then after you've had one or two too many, sometimes then your food choices get really, really much worse. And then you're munching on. And this is the whole thing about bars, right? You go to a bar and they put popcorn or peanuts in front of you that are super salty. So then you start eating that stuff, which is crap food to begin with. And then you start drinking more because you're thirsty, and it just becomes this negative cycle. And then over time, you wind up realizing, oh my God, I'm just drinking too much. I'm gaining too much weight. And then all of a sudden, then COVID happened, and they closed the churches and they closed the health clubs, but they left the liquor stores open. And I just only half jokingly say, what did the government expect was going to happen? I mean, not good things were happening. And during COVID, I drank way, way too much, like a lot of people probably did. And one of the ways that I lost a bunch of weight initially was just cutting back on what I was drinking, just like significantly cutting back what I was drinking. And then I wound up losing a lot more weight over the last year as well, because I then coupled that with eating better. And I've been very open about my problems with my hips and now my back, and I've kind of got those straightened out. I did throw out my back a little bit, but I'm past that now. But I've had multiple surgeries on my hips and so forth. And you get to a point where now I can actually exercise, and that coupled with not giving up alcohol, but drinking much, much less, and then eating healthy, eating whole foods, trying to stay away from eating foods out of a package and that sort of thing. Then I got my weight back in check, and I'd still like to lose another 25 pounds over the next, maybe 6 months. I'm in no real hurry. So I tell this story to everybody, and I'm like, so a lot of my lessons are from, drinking too much, like everybody probably did during COVID, drinking too much even before that, and then making bad food choices. And in talking with my primary care physician, who I, really love, as I'm going through all of this and trying to decide, okay, well, I want to lose weight, I got to be better about a lot of these decisions that I'm making. She asked me a question. She says, so what is your strategy for, and there was a couple of these. And one of them was, well, she knows what I do for a living. She knows I'm going out to dinner a lot, going out to lunch a lot, and even more so traveling between meetings and going back and forth to DC a lot and so forth. And she says, so what's your strategy for when you're out and you can't make that healthy food choice? And you've got to make a decision. What are you going to do? So what I just did, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it is what I did. I decided, so like if I'm hungry in the morning, I'm going to go to Dunkin' Donuts and I'm going to get one of their little egg sandwiches, right? I know how many calories that is, so I can budget that through the rest of the day. And if I'm out for lunch, I try and find a Burger King because I can get a Whopper with no mayo and no cheese, and I know how much that is, and I can still fit that in with the rest of the day from a caloric standpoint. And then there's no reason why you can't then apply that. What's your strategy for, you're out drinking. And where I went with this next, and I'll let you comment on all this here now, is I don't think there's any reason for any of us anymore to ever get picked up for driving while intoxicated. Uber is everywhere. I'm sorry, Tiger Woods, get a driver. you know, so your strategy has to be that if you are at a place and you're drinking too much, then you've got to get a ride home. You have to be responsible.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing all that, Gene. I mean, your openness is really extraordinary. I'm so proud of your journey, and I'm sure other people are very inspired by it too as well. And I think it even goes bigger than that, where, as lawyers, we're under such extreme pressure, deadlines, cases, promotions, all these things. And there can be wellness initiatives brought into law firms. There can be all these things brought in the EAP programs. But then there's this double standard where there's a complete open bar from 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. at the partner retreat. And so, I know we talked quite a bit about this too on our panel about what needs to change as far as a culture shift from the top, a leadership shift. And that's what I also like to talk to organizations about. But I agree, these small changes that you've made have really added up to big changes over time. I'm doing the same thing with individuals and with organizations that I'm teaching about recovery-informed leadership, about these small changes that can make it a more hospitable environment for a lawyer who's struggling with drinking, and maybe the work is slipping, or maybe it isn't slipping. And someone like me who's in a firm, and if it's doused in alcohol culture, I'm not going to last very long at that kind of firm. So I think there's two groups that need this focus, the one who is struggling with sobriety and the one who has long-term sobriety but can't fit ourselves into the law firm culture of heavy drinking.
Yeah, it is interesting. So the first thing that we always do at IP Watchdog is whenever we have a happy hour or whatever we're doing, we're always going to have club soda and non-alcoholic beer and other options that people can get that let them fit in, because it is a big part of what we do. And networking is done in those settings. And nobody needs to know what you're drinking. The other thing is that's if you don't want to drink at all. But the other thing that I did too is like I like Irish whiskey, and I would be drinking just Irish whiskey with no ice. So one of the things I did do is to kind of fit in. I still like to have a drink every once in a while, but I'll fill up the glass with ice. And then you're just consuming a lot less. Or if you're in certain situations, rather than having a cocktail, have a glass of wine or something like that, where you just got to make choices in advance. And I think that those types of things, having a plan that you can execute, that's so important.
I agree. It's all about what kind of life do I want to live? How do I want to show up for my loved ones? How do I want to show up at work? And I think a lot of us are thinking about those things now as far as wellness goes. And, it's a nice thing to say it's a wellness initiative, but I think it even goes further of how are we choosing to spend our life as professionals? I think people are striving more towards this work-life balance, whatever that means for people. But yeah, I agree. You've always done a great job with having these other options. I personally never felt left out or excluded at IP Watchdog. Things never got out of hand. I like how you always have snacks, included. So I think you're very inclusive to people who are alcohol-free or sober curious.
And that's the other thing too, is we're never going to have an event where we have alcohol and no food. I mean, that to me is just a recipe for disaster. And I think that one of the choices that I think you can make, and you can be smart and be wise. And then, the other thing is, maybe you can comment on this as well, because one of the places where I didn't just one day wake up and start drinking too much. It was a process. And for me, one of the big pieces to the process was that I was in so much pain because of my hip. I've had both hips replaced. And then you get to a certain age where they tell you, oh, and by the way, don't take Advil or, ibuprofen, or minimize it as much as you possibly can. And then you don't want to take too much Tylenol because that's not good for your liver. And then it's like, okay, so they start taking this away, they start taking that away, they start taking all this stuff away. And the one thing that they never told me to stop was stop drinking whiskey. So at night, sometimes when the pain would be really bad, I would almost purposefully drink too much just so I could get to sleep. And I think over time, we've become more alert to those kinds of problems that But I don't know that we as society have gotten a real good solution, right? Because that's sort of how, and luckily I never had this issue, but this is sort of how the opioid crisis got out of control, right? People are in pain and they start taking too much and then they can't get off of it. And how do you help somebody like that who's in that cycle? And for me, luckily, I was able to, through a number of years in corrective surgeries, get out of that pain cycle. But how do you deal with helping somebody who can't?
And that's a great question. As clarifying, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I don't do therapy, all those things. I'm really a recovery guide. I've walked this path, so I help other people walk the path as well. In my private coaching, we do a recovery wellness map, which touches on physical issues. We kind of go over all aspects of people's lives. And I think you're right. A lot of physical ailments, sometimes we realize we have them or we don't realize them. Alcohol is used as a medication a lot of times. So it is very difficult. I was one of those people who did wake up and started drinking too much. I started drinking very heavily from age 16 onward because I am an alcoholic. And I'm happy to say that now because it got me into a recovery space in my head. So I don't mind saying it. I know for me, it was a lot of undiagnosed depression. So that's the other kind of, mental pain that I would think I was trying to self-medicate. So I kind of get it, the physical pain and the mental pain that we use alcohol to soothe those problems. I try my best, again, to walk alongside of my clients, knowing that I'm not the physician, but kind of when we look at their lives in totality, their professional life, their identity, their physical life, their spiritual life, all these things, the clients almost come to that realization by themselves, just seeing it all laid out. And I don't know if we've ever stopped long enough as lawyers to look at all those different aspects of our lives. It almost has to be that way where we come to the point of saying, I can't live with this physical pain anymore, so I have to go figure something out with the appropriate physicians.
It's a struggle. Life getting old is not for the faint of heart.
No, I agree.
And so we've talked a little bit here about how individuals play into this, but what do you do with like a law firm, for example? I think there's two questions here. There's the one that knows that they have somebody there that's got a problem that they really want to help. And then the other is how can you create a culture where maybe these things might be impractical to say that they'll never happen, but how do you create like an early warning system so that you can identify these kinds of problems before they get too bad?
That's a great question because there hasn't been a lot of focus on this that I've found. So in my training, what I do for law firms specifically is we don't require any kind of self-disclosure. We don't have people sit in a room and do group therapy. That's not at all what this training is about. It's about realizing that we can have these human-centered conversations before we need to escalate it to a state bar. The choices I'm really seeing in law firms around substance use is ignore it, which I think is a huge violation of our professional responsibility obligations, or escalate it to HR, to the state bar, handing them a pamphlet EAP with no support. But what I'm finding also in that side of the spectrum, people would rather sit in silence with their problem than put their law license at stake or have their reputation tarnished that they can't handle a caseload. So I think a lot of this shame and secrecy is layered on top of that, where partners don't have the recovery-informed shared language to be able to make themselves available to the team members who are struggling. Because what I've seen also is that leaders care about their people. It's not like they're out to get them and punish them. They've also made a huge investment in their associates over the years. They don't want to lose their investment, but they don't know what to do. It's a very awkward conversation. And I know human nature is to say, it's not my place. I don't know if something's wrong. I don't even want to know if something's wrong. I'm going to step back and hopefully cross my fingers this gets better, whatever this is. But for me, we go through actual scenarios, and it can be tailored to the firm's culture or initiatives, and say, as a simple example, bringing someone in private, non-punitive, don't have HR in the room. HR has its place. I'm not saying this replaces HR. This is before we get to the point of having to bring HR in and saying, I've noticed some changes in performance. If it's performance-based, I just want you to know I'm here for you. There are confidential resources available to you, no strings attached. Make it more of a leadership initiative. We do this all the time in the leadership space of having to lead our teams. this is just one more thing where we make it very clear that we're there for support. We see them as people. We want them to know that you're not going to be punished. Your career won't be punished for taking advantage of these resources. For me, I never heard messaging like that as a law student or in law firms. It was never a thing I heard anywhere. I just thought I had to be this stoic perfectionist at all times. But I mean, breaking it down to the very human level, I call it the middle ground between ignoring and escalating. It's been received very well. It's almost an intuitive thing of we're already doing this in the leadership sphere of leading our teams. This is just one more way to support our teams.
I can understand why some people have trouble with that kind of conversation because a
Yes.
lot of times people who are in that the throes of the problem, whatever it is, whether it's depression or whether it's substance abuse or whether it's alcoholism or whatever, or it can be just overwhelmed because of family obligations, because maybe family members are sick or whatever it may be. There's a whole host of reasons why attorneys, anybody really, but we're talking about attorneys here, why people in our industry can become overwhelmed. And I think oftentimes when somebody does raise it, maybe it's they don't raise it properly, the person gets defensive, and then it becomes an argument. Like going back to the Tiger Woods situation, as that was going on recently, I heard one sportscaster say is somebody has to take the risk of losing him as a friend and sit him down and say, stop. I mean, maybe that's what it has to come to, but is there another way that doesn't, put the friendship on the line?
Yeah, and it's not about disclosing anything. It's not about having them admit they're an alcoholic or an intervention or group therapy. It's to say we see you as human. We support you as human. We all have issues going on. We are not going to punish you if you get help with something or if you want to talk to us about an issue. We're not going to support clients who insist on heavy drinking every time they come in town. We're not going to support clients like that no matter how good of a client they are. I know that's a tough pill to swallow because it's probably huge amount of business. But, like, I can't be staffed on a team that has to meet with a client that insists on going to a bar and getting wasted every single time they're in town. I won't do that. And that makes me choose my career versus drinking. And I should not be put in that position. So it is a culture shift. It is a culture shift from the top that has to be modeled from the top and saying we are putting our associates first. There's not going to be questioning if you order club soda. We are going to have other options at events. Maybe there is no open bar at a firm retreat. I'm not saying we can't drink anything ever. I'm not saying abstinence for everyone, but it's these messages that we're given that our human issues are acceptable in our place of work. We can be open and honest about these issues and not face career punishment.
Yeah, I think that's very important to give people the support that they need, and also just making better choices. I suspect that this is probably a little bit easier today than it would have been 30, 40, 50 years ago, where you'd see these old movies where it's like 2 or 3 martini lunches, followed by afternoon drinking, followed by a business dinner where everybody just gets, I don't know how they functioned during that period of
Yeah.
time.
I don't know, like the Mad Men scenarios.
Right. I mean, so it's not like that anymore, at least as far as I'm aware, it's not. So maybe it's a little bit easier to create the structure in place, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just mistaken. Maybe it is that way. I don't see it quite like that anymore. Although when you go away to an event or you're at a hotel, I do see an awful lot of heavy drinking and stuff like that. And so maybe it is harder than I'm thinking. I don't know.
I think people are open to the conversation now. It's not such a shock to the system anymore, especially, seeing the thought that goes into mocktail menus now. I remember when I first got sober, I had a choice of club soda, Dr. Pepper, or water. That's basically it. But now you can go out to very nice restaurants. There's a very well thought out mocktail menu in the actual glasses. Just to have the actual glassware in my hand again, I feel like I belong to the conversation. I'm not just holding a water glass anymore. So I enjoy going to restaurants that do put thought and effort into their mocktail selections.
So the one piece that we haven't talked about here is so how do you then pivot as you're trying to get in the middle ground, as you say, trying to help the people that are around you in your corporation or in your law firm. But how do you then also, how does management look at this and say, okay, we got to make sure whoever the client is, whether it's an internal client constituency at a company or clients at a law firm, how do we make sure that they are being protected as this is going?
I think what you brought up at the panel was an excellent point about billing, paying attention to those billables. If there's something that goes way out of sorts one month, it is keeping an eye on work product, of course. First and foremost, we're there for the client to make sure they get good work product from us. It's tough. It's not an easy fix. We do need to make sure that we have capable people on our team who are going to be bringing their best and delivering what we promise to the client. But also, I think the backbone of that needs to be support from the top, from the culture that says, we know you're under a lot of pressure. We appreciate all the work you do here. We're open to talk if anything ever comes up. No questions asked, no bar issues at stake, but we want to make sure we are attentive to our team as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I did mention, as you were pointing out, is the billing. Because a lot of times when you look at a lot of these cases, and I've done some work over the years with helping people at the Office of Enrollment and Discipline and representing them, and I read a lot of those cases, and I write about it. And I lecture on ethics a lot and that sort of thing. One of the common threads in this, whether it's winds up being there's an alcohol problem or an substance abuse problem, or you see it a lot of times where the attorney just becomes overwhelmed because now they have to become a caregiver for their significant other. And so there's a lot of these type of overwhelming situations. And oftentimes at the root of them is some kind of a billing problem. And, things where the attorney was doing fine, and then all of a sudden there's a billing irregularity. And I'm not talking about they're billing too little, they're billing way too much. Or maybe they're not sending bills out at all. Can be another problem, that it shows that they're overwhelmed for different reasons, or things like that you can look at and you can say, there's a problem. Another big indicator is missing filings. There's a docketing problem. Like anybody can make a docketing error, right? Anybody can miss something. It's not the standard. It's not what we strive to. But perfection, no matter what it is that we do, is just not possible. But if you start seeing somebody miss multiple things and they've never been that person before, they've never missed things, well, now that's out of character. And when something is out of character, I think you as an organization, company, or law firm probably ought to ask questions or investigate. Because the other thing is this is not just an isolated problem for the lawyer involved and for the client that is involved. This can be a problem for the whole firm. And then they have to start answering questions, because the other thing it can wind up being, in the very extreme cases, there's been cases at the OED over the years where people get so over their skis because they are having, whether it's a gambling problem, substance abuse problem, alcohol problem, now they've got financial problems on top of all of that. And then they start embezzling. Now, it's not like they're the mafia. What happens, the law considers, ethics police consider embezzlement taking out of retainer money for work I haven't yet done. And the slippery slope is, I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to file that next month. I'll just take it right now so I can make ends meet. And those kinds of choices are easy to rationalize for people who are in the throes of these problems. They're unethical and they're identifiable. So I think people need to look.
I think that's a great point. And what you brought up about having those conversations are extremely important, not approaching it from a punitive manner, but approaching it from, hey, I've noticed these changes. I'm here to talk about it. Not expecting a disclosure, not saying what's wrong with you, none of those things that HR hates for us to do, but having an actual human-to-human leadership type of conversation with them and know that they're supported. Is there something, that they can do to assist with the performance? Just human. Remembering that we're human beings here, which I know sometimes gets lost in the mix in the legal world.
And over the years, there's been state bars, and even the patent office has created, I don't know that they call it an intervention. I don't think that's what but there's a system in place where if you know you're having a problem, you can say, hey, I'm having a problem. And then the ethics authorities, when they come in, they don't come in with their baton and swinging, like it's punishment. They come in with an open hand to try and help you. And the patent office has got this. It's in the Federal Register. It's in the regulations. It's not an ad hoc system. And as long as you haven't let clients get injured and you haven't done something that involves dishonesty or a criminal activity, and you come for help, they're going to give you help. They're going to work with you to try and help you. So I'm a big fan of that. And if you, for whatever reason, if somebody's out there and they're listening to this and you're say, I just can't bring myself to ratting on myself to OED or to ethics police, talk to somebody, talk to another attorney, and get somebody to help you. So there are a number of us that have done work on the ethics side for many years, and they can maybe be that intermediary, because sometimes you do need, you need help. You're not ready to come out yourself, but find somebody who can help you and be that intermediary between where you're at and where you need to be.
It's a great point about these services that are out there provided to all lawyers. I am a volunteer with the Texas Lawyer Assistance Program, where people reach out. It's confidential. I get paired with a lawyer who's struggling. We can chat by phone or text, and we can kind of support them along their recovery path. And it's very reassuring for them to hear that, I've been a lawyer for this long, I've been successful, but I've also been sober, and I know what it takes to get sober. So that's another piece of advice I would say. If you're struggling, and of course it's very scary to tell on yourself or ask for help, but these lawyer assistance programs through, I think, every single state bar in the US are there to help. They're not there to just monitor, as, sometimes they're thought of, but it is truly a service offering by people who want to help you. So please reach out to any of the state LAP programs.
Well, this has been a great conversation. So why don't we just let people know if they do have need of help, or they have somebody who does need help and they might want to get in touch with you. How do they find you? I know you're on LinkedIn, but how else can they find you?
Yeah, always happy to talk with people. I have a website, thehealedprofessional.com. They can email me, reach out. We can see what might work best for them. If it's an individual, if it's an organization, a law firm, happy to come in, either talk in person or virtually. I do both. But my goal in setting up The Healed Professional is to help people, is to show people that we don't have to struggle just because we are a high achiever. We can ask for help. It's not failure. I've told people how I've gotten sober and stayed sober, and you can see it just boosts their confidence once they hear that they could try to follow the path that I've gone through of getting sober and staying sober. It's nothing to be ashamed about.
No, it's certainly not. It's actually a badge of honor. It's success. And everybody in our community is successful. You can't be in our community as an IP professional unless you're successful. You're smart. And on the patent side, you have to be an engineer or scientist, so you all are successful people. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish whatever it is that you want, including your own health.
Yes.
So, well, thank you, Melissa. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you for listening to IP Watchdog Unleashed. We will be back next week, and we hope you will join us again. In the meantime, please be sure to visit IPWatchdog.com to read all the latest news and information about what is happening in the intellectual property world. And also be sure to subscribe to our free daily email newsletter.